Today I'm talking with Rossa Pattersona. Like many young Christians, he drifted away from God in his teenage years, but God had not forgotten him. He led Ross to a point where he rededicated his life back to God. Since then, God has led him on an amazing journey to places like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Israel and Turkey, doing what he loves most, researching biblical sites. Ross has shared his findings with many audiences around the world. So Ross, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Julie.
So I understand that you were brought up as a Christian. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yes, I was brought up in a Christian home, believing in the Bible. Went to Christian schools and, had a faith, so to speak. I was even baptised at age 11. Mm-hmm. But in my teen years, as many young people do, we sort of drift out. We didn't see the relevance in church, shall we say. It wasn't an anti-God rebellion, but just lost interest in church and went out into the world, began working. And so that was my prodigal son experience, shall we say. Mm. Until I was working in London, actually, working in an office near Fleet Street doing computer programming. And God led me to a point where I was being convicted. I was under strong conviction. What am I doing with my life? Was what I was brought up to believe as a child true or not? Is there a God in heaven who loves us? Or is that a fairy tale? Real basic questions. And so I got to a point where I could see how meaningless life was if there's no God. If we're here by chance, then why not just live it up? If you get killed, so what,
Yeah.
But if there is a God who loves us and died for us and is trying to redeem us, it changes everything. If that's a reality, we need to respond. And so with my Christian upbringing, sitting in that office in London, I just said, okay, Lord, I surrender. Life's pointless, absolutely pointless unless you exist. So here I am, do what you want with me. It was like a total submission, total surrender at that point, sitting in that office. And I can tell you that was the biggest turning point in my life ever.
So what happened from there?
Well, that was interesting. I was working in London, computer programming, and life changed. But what was interesting, the change was in people I knew suddenly were contacting me saying, come out, let's go to the movies, let's go to this party and so forth. It was kind of like, what struck me was the change in people's attitude towards me, almost like, I thought, this is interesting, there's a war going on here. If God is true and he's trying to lead me one way and these people are trying to pull me another way, I thought, that's not coincidental. And I had so many interesting experiences. I don't want to bore you with all the details.
Why don't you give us an example?
Okay, here's one little example. When I committed my life back to God, I wanted to follow him 100%, wherever he led. And I fell into a trap, and this is a trap for new Christians, is taking every impression I got as God speaking to me. And one day I was standing on a railway station in London. There's a train coming, and I had the strong impression, just fall in front of the train and end it all. And I went, whoa, that wasn't from God. And it was a wake-up call that you've got to test everything by the Word of God. You can't live on impressions.
Yep.
And if I'd listened to that impression, I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
So that was a big wake-up call.
So you were in London, God changed your life. What happened next?
Well, God took me on a journey back to the faith I was brought up in. In London at the time, there was a vegetarian restaurant run by Adventists. And I was heading back to New Zealand. And they said, if you're going through New York, stop and see our friends in the sister restaurant there. So I thought, okay, that'll be nice. Then I thought, why not spend a weekend there? And they said, yes, spend a weekend there. They've got a lovely place in the country and everything. So I went there with the intention of spending a weekend in New York. And I ended up spending 6 months there.
Oh, wow.
And so I worked in this restaurant. It was right in the shadow of the Twin Towers at the time. This is back in the 80s. And wonderful experience. After that, I travelled around the States visiting institutions like Weimar, Wildwood and other places. Came back to New Zealand, and it was a bit of a anticlimax because people in New Zealand didn't appreciate what Adventist lay people were doing in the States.
So you came back to New Zealand and it was a bit of a letdown for you. What did you do about it?
Well, I did find people in New Zealand who were keen on doing ministry work, finally, and that was really good. And through that, I heard about the discoveries of Rona Wyatt'a. Now, when I first heard about Rona Wyatt'a back in the 80s, it was through a visiting American speaker, and it sounded so far-fetched about finding the Ark of the Covenant and the whole circumstances. I didn't take it too seriously, but a number of years later, I was given some newsletters by a guy called Jonathan Gray, and this was saying not only the Ark of the Covenant, but Noah's Ark's been found, Red Sea Crossing's been found, Mount Sinai's been found, Sodom and Gomorrah's been found, and here was pictures, locations, how you get there, here's the government visitors centre, all these details. And I remember thinking, wow, this is either a very elaborate hoax, people have gone to a lot of effort, or there's something here, this is something substantial which can easily be checked out.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd check it out. And that led me on a path to realising, hey, it makes sense. God has preserved things for this generation to confirm faith in His Word.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exciting.
Then I was invited to Australia, and I met a group of people that were quite interested in Ron's work. And so we organised a group to bring Rona Wyatt'a to Australia. And we invited him out in 1998, 1999. And we had some public meetings with him where he presented to the public these findings of Noah's Ark, Red Sea Crossing, Sodom and Gomorrah, etc. And we had so many people turning up, we had to turn people away at the door.
That's incredible.
Now, that's a good problem to have. And that sent me on another journey, so to speak, where I've now been to the Middle East probably about 15 times, 16 times, researching these things, and God has opened amazing doors.
Yeah. That sounds really exciting. Can you tell us some more about that, please?
We first did a trip through Egypt and Israel, went to the Red Sea Crossing, did some diving. I've now done 120 dives in the Red Sea over various trips. And we've seen in the coral shapes. Now, you've got to understand it's 3,500 years since the Exodus, so it's not like a museum down there. But what you find is what you'd expect to find. If you have man-made shapes where coral has grown on it and left the shape there. I was blessed to be able to go to Saudi Arabia a few years ago. And again, everything that Rona Wyatt'a and Jonathan Gray shared is exactly as you find. The mountain there, the blackened peak, the altar at the base, everything is there. We've been to Sodom and Gomorrah and other sister cities. And again, we took samples ourselves back to New Zealand to a lab here, had it analysed, and the test results are consistent with what you'd expect from cities made of limestone burnt with sulphur.
Yeah.
Clean ash with sulphur balls in it. Most exciting things to do with Noah's Ark. And last year, God opened amazing doors, and we're hoping this year to begin excavating with government permission, full legal permission through a university to excavate the Noah's Ark site.
Oh, that's really amazing. That's fantastic. Wow, what a privilege to be a part of something like that. So I understand you've been going around the world doing outreach programs. Can you tell us about that?
I was scared of public speaking when I was young, very nervous. But one thing I decided when I came back to God, I wouldn't ever refuse an invitation, If God was leading me to do something, I wouldn't say no.
Yeah.
And that was a big decision. But anyway, and so one day I got asked to do some meetings, and it was a challenge. It was hard, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yes.
So now I've been to Japan. I've done several series in Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines. We've had amazing results in the Philippines. Again, presenting these findings as confirmation of the Bible, and then from that leading into Bible prophecy and other truths that we know.
Yeah.
And the first trip to the Philippines, we had 497 baptisms from an outreach we did, and we've been back twice since with more baptisms following on, probably close to 1,000 people now in the Philippines, from presenting these findings and the biblical relevance and prophecy and where we are today in the stream of time. So I've been to Australia, many Pacific Islands, and now it's been on YouTube, and I get emails from around the world. It's been on First Light TV. So that's another ministry door that God's opened. So, and that's what these findings are all about. It's not about looking for holy relics or things. It's about presenting to the world what you find is exactly what you expect to find if you take the Bible as your starting point and an accurate historical book.
Yes. So you were telling me before that as a result of these evangelistic outreaches that you met your wife. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, that's another blessing from these programs. I was invited to do a series here in the Waikato in Te Araha, and the minister suggested before we start that I'd come and do a couple of services at the church. And so I was giving a talk in the church here about the covenants, long story, about the old covenant, the new covenant, how a covenant comes into force when the testator dies. This is from the book of Hebrews. Now, sitting in the congregation was this attractive lady who works in a lawyer's office, who does wills and trusts and things. And so she was listening from a legal mind point of view, you know, and I was going through the process in the Bible, how, like the Bible says, a testament is a force, you know, after the testator dies. And hence, when Jesus died on Calvary and established the new covenant, death of the testator on the cross, and then nothing can be changed, just like you can't change a person's will when they die. And she hadn't heard that before. I got this from a Joe Cruz talk. It was a really nice illustration Joe Cruz used. And she said to me later, I was wondering, who is this man sharing this information? And so we got talking, and during the course of the outreach program, we got to know each other very well. We just hit it off. We're on the same page.
Nice.
And so that was wonderful. And now we've been happily married for 4 years.
Oh, that's great. So Ross, why do you think God has used you to do this amazing work?
If I can quote Rona Wyatt'a, he was asked similar things when he was doing this work, and he said, maybe I was the only one available. We'll put my hand up. And I feel the same way. There's nothing special I've done. People ask me, I wish I could, or say to me, I wish I could do what you're doing. And I say, you can. I'm not a qualified archaeologist. Maybe I took the effort to go and check these things out, and maybe most people couldn't be bothered. You know, so again, I'm nothing special at all, but maybe I just took the effort to do these things.
Do you think part of it was taking a leap of faith?
Absolutely, because I know a lot of people would hear these things and go, wow, there's so many claims out there, I'll just leave it alone. But I thought, if this is true, it's significant, it's worth pursuing. So I took the time and effort and money to go over there and check it out, which maybe most people don't. And I guess that took me down a path, set me on a course, and ended up with today, we're going to be excavating Noah's Ark with the full permission of the government.
That's fabulous. So Ross, what would you say to a person who is just starting out on their faith journey?
It's very important when you give your life to Christ to commit yourself fully, I believe. Christianity is not just sort of another slot in your life, it's meant to be your whole life. Becoming a Christian means following Christ, and it means 100%.
Yes.
And I can say from my experience, if you do that, you know, there's areas in our lives where you say, no, Lord, I don't want to give this up, or I like this, you know, we sort of make a boundary for God. But if we get rid of that boundary and say, Lord, 100%, do that, because then God can take your life and do amazing things with you.
Yes.
That's what I found in my experience. So my message is make it 100%. 100%. That's what genuine Christianity is. It's like a total surrender. Here I am, Lord, do what you want with me. That was the commitment I made, and I can say, let God take your life and do something, and you'll be amazed what he does.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ross, for coming and sharing your testimony today about what God has done in your life and how He's led you, and about the work that you've been doing.
You're welcome, Julia.
The scriptures say in Jeremiah chapter 3 verse 33, "Call unto me, and I will answer thee and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not." Isn't it wonderful how God has led in Ross's life? When you dedicate your life unreservedly to God, you will be amazed at where He will lead you. I challenge you to dedicate your life to God and see where He takes you.